So welcome to Watches with Dennis. We are doing the Saturday live stream like I normally tend to do. Hopefully a little smoother as we move forward throughout I actually set all this up 10 minutes ahead of time. Normally I do it in 90 seconds. So you would think I had it all good to go, but I was busy reading up on the articles we're going to talk about today, and then some stuff with my other hobby, pinball, has resulted in me having to do a little bit of research beyond what I was hoping to have to do on a Saturday. But we won't be going into that. We also don't have any pre-recorded videos for me to discuss. I did my, well, I guess I kind of do. The five worst, let's put it that way. The five worst, I was going to say top worst, which doesn't make much sense. The five worst watches of 2023 as chosen solely by me. I did talk a little bit about the plan to get that video out on the last live stream. I did get it out later that day. I don't even know how many people have seen that. I kind of let it go, and then people can go and enjoy it. Naturally, the Alex collaboration watch with Audemars Piguet was a highlight one that had to be in that list. So I've seen some feedback on that. I started to think maybe that should be my thing. Should I always work that Alex watch into every at least live stream that I do? I think no, because I think that's going to get really, really tedious. And it is AP. I do think at some stage they will one up it. I know some people felt they already have, but I don't yet. I think that is the pinnacle of not knowing what we are doing. We got to get the Utes. We got to get the Utes to love our brand. And we're trying everything we can. But it is AP, and I look forward to seeing what abominations they create in 2024 as they do everything in their power to drive themselves in terms of brand equity beneath Vacheron Constantin, which you wouldn't think is possible. But I do wonder at this point. So anyway, so that video is out. I haven't done anything else this week other than I've been busy working. So we've got a few topics today. I moved some of the new watches, or it's kind of like, all right, I got two new watches I'm going to want to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Junghans Meister Fein automatic Signatur. They have a new version of that. They had another one that came out, I think, a while ago. I don't know if it was this year. I don't think it was this year. I think it's an older line. But so we'll talk about that. Seiko has some couple new GMT watches in their Seiko 5 sports line. So I thought that was probably worth knowing. So those are the two new watches that were kind of revealed over the last couple of weeks that I want to go ahead and dive into. I also, though I believe it came out earlier in the year, there was a review that a blog to watch did on the Bohen StarDiver. And that watch is interesting. Speaking of the Alex AP collaboration watch, this watch has some aesthetic choices that I want to go ahead and talk about. So we'll end with that. But after we do the welcomes, the first thing I want to open with is the news that Breitling is acquiring Universal Geneve. So that's what we're going to actually start off with. So good morning, Coachy. Glad you could make it. And thank you for being a 99-cent club member, which, as a reminder, if you want to help this channel out, you don't have to do that. I appreciate that very, very much. And there's a link in the video description, but you can like the video. I always forget to tell people to like the live stream videos because I'm forgetful. But anyway, that's always helpful. And likewise, subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified when I put out new videos. I do try and be consistent about this, but I do pre-recorded stuff. That's what most of my channel historically has been. And I do try and work that in. I don't work from home anymore, so it's a lot harder to work those in than it used to be. But anyway, we'll make it work somehow. We'll get through stuff. Same to Tuna. Thank you for joining live stream and for being a club member. Hey, Frank, glad you were able to jump in this morning. And Underhay, welcome, Underhay. Glad you're here. And I think and Pretu. I still wonder if I'm saying your handle right, but I don't think you've ever corrected me. So I'm going to keep calling you Pretu. Koji says, you mocking the plastic lawn chair / keeping a gold watch next to your keychain will never get old personally. Okay, well, maybe we'll do it as like what Cookie Monster would say, sometimes food, right? Cookies are sometimes food, and making fun of AP is a sometimes food. So we'll rely on that to some degree. But we got a watch we're going to make fun of. At least you guys might like it. I'm going to make fun of watch at the end of this video. But That's the clickbait. We gotta start with the serious matters first. So let's jump into this. A lot of sites have covered this news. I tend to favor a blog to watch, other than they do a terrible job of summarizing the specifications on the newly released watches. So one thing I should write into them, tell them just one thing I want you to fix. And the reason I want them to do it is solely because it helps my channel, because I can find the stuff faster. So that's not a very good reason, but it's a very Dennis reason. But this big time news, breaking news when they announced it on the 12th. So it's fairly recent news. Breitling, Universal Geneve. So those of you who have ever looked in particular at vintage watches, or you've gone through like, what are the cheap watches on eBay? You've got to have heard of Universal Geneve. I didn't even know they were still quote unquote active, but they kind of have been. And I think maybe I knew, and then I keep forgetting because I don't know anyone who deals in Universal Geneve. I don't know where you go to buy them outside of getting them used. So anyway, it's a brand that has a lot of historic cues, a lot of very famous sort of designs that they went with back in like the 50s, 60s. And it is a brand that never recovered from the quartz crisis. It was put out of business. Its name is one of those names that we've seen like Blancpain and all the rest that have kind of come back. And then, but unlike Blancpain, which Swatch Group has acquired, Universal Geneve has not really been in the ownership group of anything that I know of that's a major player in the wristwatch space. So anyway, so this is pretty big news because Breitling is a big player, and especially over the last 5 years or so. So for those that don't know, so there's George Kern. George Kern is the CEO of Breitling and is widely credited, I think fairly, for turning the Breitling ship around. Now, Breitling has always been a very famous brand, and a lot of people have aspired to getting Breitlings for a long, long time. But prior to Kern being the CEO, Breitling had ended up developing a reputation for doing very blingy, Bentley-style, large, I'll use the word gaudy watches. Just they got really big and really shiny, and then the markets moved away from that. Where big and shiny, the huge watch look was all the rage in the like the first decade of this millennium, the 2000s in particular. But we've seen a lot of trending against that since then, and also moves away from watches that are a bunch of flash. So Kern has come in, and the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, Breitling is a top 10 export out of Switzerland now. I think according to this article, he's basically doubled the brand's turnover since he came in 2018. So Breitling has been doing very well. One might argue Breitling is outside of Rolex, which is just, of course, maintaining its position at the top of the Swiss heap in terms of money being made. Breitling, if you will go and look at those charts that come out every year about the projected amount of money made by exports for Swiss watchmakers, Breitling has climbed that chart massively. It's incredibly impressive turnaround. And so a lot of credit is given to the CEO for that. So I think the thought here is that the plan that's going to happen with Universal Geneve? Because as this caption notes, George Kern is now the CEO also of Universal Geneve. So they're keeping the same helmsman for both companies, which you wouldn't necessarily assume right away. So Breitling is owned, it's not 100% owned, but Breitling's mostly owned by a holding group called Partners Group. So anyway, it's a private equity, and private equity has been in the watch space for a long time, where they take these brands and do something with them. And sometimes like the Kering Group ended up letting go of Ulysse Nardin and Gerard Perregaux, so they're independent now. But they were in a holding group that didn't really do anything successful with them, I think you could argue. In this case, obviously, with Breitling, things have been going pretty well. But it is a small percentage of the portfolio. Breitling's only 3% of the Partners Group. So it's very, very small. So, okay, they pick up another watch brand. Again, we're very familiar with the watch conglomerates, and we know how successful that can end up being. Swatch Group, of course, has a ton of watch brands. LVMH has a few. LVMH leans more into other luxury, but they do have a number of high-profile watch brands. Of course, Richemont, very famous holding. I tend to use the word conglomerate. conglomerate full of watchmakers, and that's just the Swiss stuff, which some of those own some German stuff too. But I mean, what's Seiko but a holding group at this point? I mean, because you've got not just Seiko, they own Orient, they own Grand Seiko, they own Creedor. I mean, this Citizen, what they've got, was it Frederic Constant, I think's in the Citizen group. I mean, it's the Citizen group. They got stuff, not to mention their Miyota movements. So my point is, this is very, very common behavior. Independence is the exception, not the rule anymore. So, okay, back to this tale. So Universal Geneve, why would they want it? The logic that's explored in this A Blog to Watch article, which again, links in the video description, so you can go read it. I'm not going to read it to you. It's a very long article, so I never read to you anyway, but I really couldn't in this case. The author's speculation here is that Breitling feels like it occupies a certain segment of the market, that luxury sports segment, and that most of the pieces that they come out with, which many of you probably know if you go and you check them out ever, is in that sub $10,000 range. So Breitling is kind of, depending, because they really mark up their watches a lot if they put any gold in them. But again, Rolex does that too. Is they occupy that what is oftenly described as, I feel, entry-level luxury up to maybe mid-level luxury. I don't know where most of you put the demarcation line between entry-level and mid-level. Once you broach $1,000, to me, it's all expensive. So, but I get it. I mean, you know, there obviously $1,000 is far more entry than $10,000. So anyway, that's the space Breitling occupies. So I think the thought is, at least from this author's thought, that this partner group holding company with Breitling is thinking, okay, Rolex does Tudor and Rolex. So Rolex is the high, and I want to do it the right way on the screen for you guys. Rolex is the high-end stuff, and then Hollands Waldorf brought about Tudor to compete in the lower dollar space. And this is the opposite. Breitling will be the lower dollar space item, and then Universal Geneve could be that space where they're competing with, I mean, that's the author's speculation was JLC, which I think wouldn't be shocking given what Universal Geneve used to be in terms of competition. But Vacheron came up, Patek, entry-level Patek, obviously, not like Grand Complication Patek. So basically, that space where you start getting in that above $10,000, maybe to, I think they put ranged out to 30,000. I'm thinking like 10 to 50 is kind of that space, because Pateks by and large start around 30, I think. At least the ones that are more dressy, like the Calatravas. But lest I start rambling, that's that thought. So I'm curious, especially for those of you, I mean, if you're not watching live, feel free to comment, because I do go back and read those. But those of you live, like, what do you think about this? Does this make sense? I'm not sure this is a good move. I don't think it's necessarily a bad move, but kind of where I'm at right now is there's no reason in my head why Breitling couldn't just use the Breitling name and get into the dress watch game. Like, if that's the goal, if the goal of the Universal Geneve is, I don't know if they're thinking Universal Geneve sports watch. Again, you see this photo here, the Pole Router, very famous watch of theirs. I believe, was the Pole Router a Gerald Genta design? I can't recall. It's very popular, and since it's popular, I assume that it is. But because that's usually the tying force to anything old that anyone cares about anymore is Genta. But regardless, it's a popular watch relatively for its. I mean, you have to go vintage. So maybe they're thinking kind of something in the sports watch line. But to me, when I hear Universal Geneve, I'm sitting here thinking about these more elegant looking watches like this poster here, where they're, it's kind of, it feels like dress watch Fein. They've always felt like a dress watch company to me when I've looked at most of those. That's George. So stuff like this. But does the brand, again, and this is common in the watch space, right? That we see them resurrect brands that are dead and lean on that heritage to try and trigger sales, which with Universal Geneve, I mean, that was a company founded in the late 1890s, and then the latter half of the 1890, I don't remember, 1896 or something. So it's an older brand, so it checks out, but Breitling already has name cachet. So here's where I'm at with it. I don't see why, and I'll catch up on your comments here in a moment. I don't see why Breitling just doesn't do, and this is going to be like a subsidiary. I mean, like, I think a subsidiary, they noted something. Gosh, this is the problem. The article's so large, and I just went through and read the whole thing before coming on air. But yeah, they're turn it into a subsidiary. So I'm not sure if it's going to have both brands branding. I'm assuming no. Here, anyway, I'm rambling a bit. Here's where I'm at. Why not just do designs? I mean, you can watch designs get copied all the time. Why doesn't Breitling just do dress watches? There, let me put it that way. Why don't they just make a new line, rely on the Breitling name, and sell watches, and make them look like Universal Geneve-esque, modernized, or whatever? I mean, why not? Who, like, collector-wise, is there really a lot of people that fondly remember Universal Geneve at this point? It's been relatively stagnant since Quartz. So it's just, it is a very famous brand, and they've made a lot of watches, but it wasn't historically famous for being expensive. So I don't know if that's a good spot to place it. And again, that was the author's speculation about what the partner holding group would want to do with it, is move it up market and keep Breitling more in that entry space. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good move. To me, if you're going to do it, you might as well just do it all under Breitling and launch some new lines and let them get in the dress watch game. Kind of like what Omega does, where Omega's got, I'm getting less and less entry, but you've got your kind of entry level lines like the DeVille and the Seamaster. And then, you have your Speedmaster stuff, but they do like grand complication stuff, and they do expensive stuff. It doesn't seem like they do very much of it. It's more like to show off, but they could. I don't think it would shock anyone if Omega would ended up saying, you know what, the DeVille and the Constellation just aren't dressy enough. We're going to have a Calatrava-esque line or a Patrimony-esque line, whatever, and just like do precious metal only, like a line of stuff that's only in that, no steel. I mean, I don't think anyone would be shocked at Omega doing it. They definitely could. So again, I don't get it exactly. I sort of do. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure Universal Geneve is a brand worth resurrecting. It would make more sense to me for an upstart that didn't already have a successful brand to want to get the rights to the name. That makes more sense. But Breitling's already established. Why not just diversify Breitling more? I don't know. There's probably a logic to it. I'm not a business person, so what do I know? Okay, let's go ahead and catch up. I saw a lot of chats have come in, so I will do my best. Good morning, Pixel Punch. Welcome to the live stream. Didn't catch you earlier. Koji says, this is a nice Christmas gift. Maybe they'll reissue things like the Tri-Compacts, Paul Router, White Shadow. So, all right, so Koji likes this, likes the idea of the Universal. And that's another thing I didn't touch on. I didn't even think about it, but it's a fair point, is doing what, and again, Breitling's been doing this with the Breitling catalog under Kern, but taking those existing model lines and bringing them back, modernizing them, and relying on the nostalgia, people who looked at them at Chrono 24, even if you don't have a historic connection to like I was born after Universal Geneve was nothing. Like whatever it's been since it like came back initially is irrelevant to me. So, and all the watches that are of any respect are older than I am. So, and I don't buy watches that old. So for me, it's a nothing. Tuna says, do Breitling offer a dress watch as such? Not that I'm aware of. I'm not super familiar with their catalog, but Breitling seems to mostly do kind of like the IWC thing. Well, that's a bad example because IWC has the Portofino and the Portugueser at this point. I used to call it the Portuguese. To my knowledge, Breitling pretty much just sticks to the Airland Sea theme of sports watches. Now, they do dressify them, dressy versions of them, 18 karat gold bezels on their Navitimers and stuff like that. But there's not a line that I readily think of with them that if they have a dress watch line, it hasn't gone anywhere. Kind of like Rolex's dress watch line. Koji says, I've never seen a modern one, Tuna, only vintage. Okay, talking about some of the old historic Universal Geneves. Orange Hand, welcome to the live stream, by the way, Orange Hand. I can only be wrong about this, but my money is on Breitling losing on its UG bet. Historic name known by vintage collectors, but most collectors won't line up to buy a recreation anymore. Actually, I mean, you could be wrong. Not only be wrong, you could be right. I think, and there might be I still have the tab up. I've of course just blown up my head for no obvious reason. But there was someone on I only got like 3 comments in, but I saw, okay. So someone on their comment section actually said similar. I don't know if this is you, Orange Hand. It doesn't say Orange Hand on it. It says, I think this is a vanity project. I cannot see a strategic commercial opportunity or justification why UG over other legacy, and in some cases, better reputational watchmakers makes sense. So you are not alone, Orange Hand. And you probably already heard my rambling, not really rant, but my rambling ramble that I don't see why you bother with UG as as a holding group, as Breitling. Why not lean into? I didn't even think about what the commenter Villaman said about like trying to resurrect some other more prestigious brand, especially if you're going more up market. But it's a fair point. Why not? Why UG? Is it just is it all the pole router? Is it just like, because that's the only one I ever hear anyone talk about is the pole router, and that's it. So I don't know. But yes, interesting. Koji says, yes, Orange, weirdos like me have always admired UG and lamented their current status, but I don't see them being a big seller for Breitling at all. And Tuna thinks that UG would mainly be chronographs, which, he adds the word two at the end, which is a fair point, because what is it that most people think of with Breitling? Super Ocean aside, it feels like it's a chronograph company. I mean, it's one of the most respected chronograph makers there. In fact, to me, the two most respected chronograph makers, like in terms of the movement, are Breitling and Zenith. Those are the two I think of with there are lots of companies that make a nice chronograph. But again, it was noteworthy that Rolex with Tudor turned to Breitling for the chronograph technology to throw in their Tudor watches. And they did an exchange because Breitling got to access some of the movement tech that Tudor was doing. Because Breitling actually does a lot of ETA-based stuff to this day. They do a lot of eBosch movements, and kind of like how Tudor had done historically with their third-party eBosch movements. They brand them with like a Breitling caliber, but it's an ETA or a Solita, whatever they're using. So they obfuscate it, they mask it, which bluntly pisses me off. I hate that companies do that. I mean, if you want to note, go ahead. In fairness, you want to note like you changed the hairspring or something, so you're giving it a caliber name. Okay, fine, but I still think they should note like SW200 base on their website, just out of honesty, just a preference of mine. But everyone does, like, you do you, Breitling. You do what you want. Tuna says the entry level DeVille is still a good few £1,000s. Yes. And prices have been going up. Same with Richemont and what they've done with like saying like that UG might be in competition with JLC. What is that? Did we mean modern JLC? I'm assuming he did. David, I think, is the author of this from A Blog to Watch. I'm assuming that's what he meant. But JLC's had like 4 price increases in the last 2 years. It's gotten extremely, extremely expensive in my view, which, I forgot. Sometimes on live streams, I try and remember to do a wristwatch check. I am wearing my JLC Reverso because I was in a suit yesterday and it was the watch on the desk, because I don't normally wear the Reverso in a t-shirt, but that's how it is for today. John, welcome to live stream. First time on the channel. Well, I hope you enjoy it. I get a little rambly, so apologies, but you can always not tune in if it gets too obnoxious, because that is your right as a human being. Underhay says, the article I read suggests they plan to move significantly up market with Universal, but I'm not sure the brand is a good fit like that. Why not do new brand with new designs like Toyota, Lexus? Again, I think it kind of gets back to like what Koji mentioned, that there's something, especially if they want to farm the old catalog, there's something there that you can build off of. And so I see the value in UG there, that Breitling might be like, you know what, bringing back things like the pole router, great starting point. We'll get initial attention. Like, if nothing else, even if like consumers are like, we don't know anything about any of this, watch media is going to lap that up. I mean, there are a bunch of, I'm not a vintage, as I noted, I'm not a vintage guy, but there are like watch journalists that, do articles and watch podcasts and stuff. And like their collections, they're very vintage oriented. So they're going to give media it's free media attention to do something with UG. So it's kind of like here on the YouTube space. And this is a hobbyist channel. I I don't make my living off of what's my average pool on. I guess I've never told you guys, like my average pool on revenue in a month is around $50 on YouTube. So just so you know, and so that's, this is not my day job. Other YouTube channels, be they hobbyist or professional media doing the YouTube thing or whatever, or they're full-time or part-time, you notice something like we all, myself included, like when there's a new tutor, we cover it because we get a lot of views out of tutor, disproportionate to the actual sale market share that they have out of Switzerland. Like you look at the top sales and what is it? It's Rolex number 1, Cartier number 2, Omega number 3. Tutor videos get more views than Omega videos. They just do. And so whenever there's a new tutor release, I almost always do a first thoughts video because it's easy content and people want to consume it. Long story short, does Breitling think people want to consume Universal Geneve? I don't know. The answer to that is a yes, but I do know the answer is more of a yes there than it is for them starting up something new that no one has a name for, especially if they're going to put in a new name. Like they make their version of a Crador. No. This gives them you start further up off the blocks. If you steal something else, steals a cruel word. I shouldn't have used that, but that's what I said. So if you steal something else from the past and just lop yourself onto it, you get a head start. I just don't know if this is the best head start that they could have gone with, especially since this isn't a new, like a holding company. Like, gosh, we sure wish we were in the watch game. They have Breitling already. What Breitling? I mean, it's Breitling. It's far better name recognition than Universal Geneve has in today's age. Koji says, I had a JLC Chrono from 1940 with a UJ movement. It is excellent. Scott, welcome to the live stream, by the way, Scott. I am not a fan of Breitling, but George Kern appears to be a sharp operator I wouldn't bet against. I've never owned a Breitling. I've looked at more and more, especially the ones that have come out under Kern because they are far more appealing to me, but nothing has. I got kind of close on a Navi timer that wasn't the Chrono version. I like the look a lot. I'm still not sure if the slide rule's useful without the Chrono, and if it's totally non-functional and it's just aesthetic, it's like the Alex AP thing. I can't just buy a fashion watch like that. It needs to be able to do what it's advertising on the tin, or in this case, on the chapter ring or bezel. I forget where they had the print on it. John says UG was very nice vintage brand, but can Breitling modernize them now? Given what Kern has done with the Breitling older catalog, John, I think the answer is they could. Is the appetite there? Especially when we think about today, like today, watch market's cooling, lots of surplus stock. It's easy to go into a lot of places and buy inventory. One of our channel 99 Cent Club members Ken had posted in the Watches Within Us Discord, which again, there's no money cost associated with that. There's a link in the description if you want to be on that to chat about watches, like textual chat. He posted on one of the channels, he went into a Vacheron AD and they offered him the 222 at retail. Like he could walk in and just buy it. And he said he had no buying history with them. So things are shifting as the market is cooling for watches. Is this a great time to do this with the Universal Geneve? Getting the name probably isn't in and of itself. I guess it was quasi-operating, so maybe that's not a big deal. Like cost-wise, it's probably not a huge impact in comparison to what Hodinkee did, which is go in, buy Crown and Caliber while prices were really high on watches, and now they're stuck with this lodestone or shedding staff left and right not because the name Crown and Caliber was expensive, but they bought the inventory, and the inventory is like worth 50% what it was when they bought it. So they're just sitting there with this pile of watches, and they don't want to lower the price too much because of how much they bought them for. But nobody wants to buy them at this. This ain't 2022 anymore. No one wants to buy them at those prices. So interesting problem to have. I don't think that Breitling's getting into that boat. I'm curious to see if they could really revamp the look and everything. I think Kern has not everything he's done has been a winner. Like some people have pushed back against the new Super Ocean looks and stuff. So there may be some experimentation, but as Koji has noted, there is more than one line. It's not just like the pull router. So there's multiple things they could try and develop at once out of the UG catalog. So I think there's potential there. I just don't know if there's a strong enough nostalgia to want to do I just don't get if I were them, and I'm not, I would have more explored to see if Is Ulysse Nardon and Gerard Perregaux, like, are they doing okay on their own independent wise? I mean, everyone celebrated their independence, but are they celebrating their independence? Is it like the video game industry where if you're independent, sure, you get full creative control and you're one failure away from going out of business, and then picking up like UN and saying, all right, we're going to manage Ulysse Nardon now, which operates at a higher price point than Breitling, and then explore that. I don't know. It's different. This is more of a blank slate than that because nothing of import has come out of UG in years, whereas UN is still turning out interesting stuff. Tuna says, like when Mercedes tried to do a Rolls Royce, they brought back the Maybach name, but it failed. And Preetu says, my question is, would they have been better off investing that money back into Breitling? It's a fair question. And I lean to yes. I don't think this is a smart move. I don't know if it's necessarily a vanity project. I see where they're coming from. I think I see where they're coming from. I think it's a diversification. I think they're really worried about, and again, because there's a holding company controlling almost all of Breitling. I think they're worried about everything being in this one basket. And what if the market turns against the Breitling lines? To me, that's just expand the Breitling lines. That's because that's the answer we all, as enthusiasts, is that not the answer almost all of us tell Audemars Piguet to do? It's like, dudes, at some point, the Royal Oak isn't going to be what everyone wants. And like 4 of your 5 lines are Royal Oak. You need to, but we don't tell them pick up a UG and get a subsidiary to diversify your income. We tell them bring back the Jules Audemars line and such. We tell them bring back some other lines that aren't Royal Oak lines. Diversify your lines. Don't diversify your brands. But I could see it working both ways. I'm not feeling that one. Speaking of feeling watches, let's go ahead and jump into a couple new releases. We'll start with a more boring one. I think most of you won't care too much about this one, but I thought it was kind of interesting. So Junghans, I've never owned a Junghans watch, but it's a brand that I feel is very associated with Bauhaus for obvious reasons. If you look at a lot of their watches, not every one of their watch lines is a Bauhaus movement watch. So they do more. See, they do have diversification. So they're not a one-trick pony. But anyway, they came out with these Meister Fein automatic signature dress watches. Now, the Meister Fein watches, or maybe it's the Meister signature. I don't remember. They have some that are Roman numeral that were already out, but these new versions are a lot cleaner, a lot more with that kind of Bauhaus inspired aesthetic. To me, quasi Bauhaus, not like the pure, like the Max Bills, which look super Bauhaus, like the Bauhaus school of thought totally applied. These actually kind of remind me of, if you're familiar with Vacheron Constantin's Patrimony line, I think that's what this is kind of giving me some vibes on, but far more affordable than going VC. These are pretty wearable watches. I believe they're powered by SW200s. We're at Monochrome, so again, link in the video description. So 11 millimeters thick, so wearable, under 40 millimeters in diameter. It is driven by, they call it the caliber. See, it's labeled properly here. So the caliber J800, but it's the Sleeta SW200. So anyway, at about 1,700 euros, that's with tax. This is on the higher end you can get a lot of Junghans watches for under $1,000 US. So this is on the higher end, but relatively attractive looking watch. The date bothers me. So I will call that out. Again, I get it, SW200, so it's going to have a date, but unless they want to, they probably would have ghost stated it if they did not. But I think there was a comment in this article. I won't load it, but you can see it visually just from these images. This date is really inset, really inset. I mean, you can tell because I think, and this is a design decision I don't like, these indices are very long. That's what the length of them reminds me of the Patrimony. They're very, very long. But this one's a little shorter, but they didn't shorten this one. So to me, it's unbalanced. I'm sure they're thinking, well, the date window and where it goes out to the edge matches the length of these. So I mean, they tried, right? But did they try very well? Here's the problem. When I see a date like this, you know that the movement is way smaller than the case. because of where the date window is. That's what's forcing this. It's not a design decision that date is where it is. That date is that inset because that's what their third-party movement mandates that they do. And in fact, there is a shot of this because they did a display case back, which is such a no-no. It's such a no-no when your movement doesn't fit right. They've obfuscated this relatively well. You can see, here's the movement. You can see the edge of the movement here. So the edge of the movement goes all the way. They have this massive screw down case back for the display. Very thick, width-wise thick, not thick like wearing it on your wrist thick. And then you've got all this additional case. So when you look at it from that perspective, this is a little movement shown off, and they tried to cover up all that extra space that they need to fit this. And again, this isn't even a 40 millimeter watch, and they needed that much spacing. You close case back this and hide your shame when you have to do this. That is the right answer when this is the case. I'm not judging that they had to use they weren't going to retool their case sizing to accommodate this movement. I'm not judging that at the price point. Hide it. But I will judge that when you do that, you have to live with this decision about having a very inset. I mean, look how close. I mean, it's not quite halfway between the center of the dial and the edge of the bezel, but it's pretty close. So for me, this is a no-go aesthetically because of that. But I actually like this better than the Max Bill, like conceptually. I struggle with that more pure Bauhaus looking watch. I just don't think that's attractive. So this I think is okay. Now the rest of it, like the signature part, I mean, it's called the signature, so I get it. I don't love it, but it's fine. They went very minimalist with the dial, which I appreciate. I also like kind of the circular brushing. You can kind of make out if you're on a bigger screen, these are kind of circular brushed. I think that's very attractive. And the clean handset and all that. Again, very clean. Junghans does clean very well. So very, very clean. The date window is such an eyesore. And the decision to display the movement is a pity. But again, especially at this price point, I think a lot of people they really want display casebacks. I understand. I've been collecting for a while though. So to me, looking at very, very basic movements is not particularly inspirational. This actually isn't a bad looking movement. I just wish it was bigger. I mean, they got the blue screwed heads. There's some engine turning, it looks like. So, I mean, they try, like, this looks better than Tudor's movements. Come on, Tudor, step it up or hide it. But I thought it was okay. And I would never buy it, but it's all right. It's got a few glaring issues. And I think you could blame half of those on the price point. So kind of, I mean, what you would kind of expect. But I will see what you all think as I go ahead and take a quick look at all of this. Another comment from John back on the prior topic of Breitling acquiring UG. I think Breitling is a takeover candidate and UG may be making them more appealing. I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point, especially since when you're owned by a holding group in particular, I mean, like partner holding group is like the name. I do think there's always that thing about not necessarily thinking about shareholder dividend value and all of that, but building it up and then selling it for a profit and then moving on, that venture capital kind of thing. I always think about that with partner groups. So that's a good point. It could be a move to try and do that. Now on to the Junghans Meister Fein. Koji says a bit pricey, but attractive watch. Pre2 says, I have a love and hate with Junghans. I bought a Maxville Sapphire, but immediately returned it because I thought it was fake due to the sapphire glass not sitting in the case fully. Yeah, again, I think some of this is a victim of the price point that they operate at. It's a very attractive price point for people that love dress watches and do not want to spend a lot on the dress watch. And I mean, I see it on like Teddy Baldessar. I know it's often in his top lists of recommend. Like, I respect more the recommendation of a Junghans over a like the Orient Bambino because I'm just like, guys, those of us who like dress watches, quit telling everyone get the Orient Bambino. I feel like we're shoehorning everyone into the Bambino. And I think the Bambino, at least the older ones, look very, very nice. But it's just like, I feel like there's more than just that. And Junghans is a good option for people that are like, I don't want to spend $1,000. I mean, obviously not this example that we're talking about, but if you want to get a dress watch, you don't want to spend $1,000. It's a brand that I think a lot of people should be turning to. But there are things that, because of the look, that are are an issue. Now, Preto, I did not know that I'm not surprised that they make a Maxville sapphire. I'd always associated it with plexiglass because, again, that's like the one, I think that's their mainstay one that's more affordable. So, and maybe that one looks better. I have one glass watch. It is a vintage watch. It does have a very nice warm look to it. So in some ways, I think it suits what Junghans is doing with the Bauhaus thing pretty well. But one of those things. Koji says, I had the Maxville chronoscope and sold it because of the noisy Valjoux 7750. It was also a scratch magnet, not on the case, but the case back. Well, anyone who's ever watched my channel for much period of time knows I despise the Valjoux 77 series of movements. Noisy is generous. For me, it's that helicopter rotor that feels like the whole watch wants to fly away off into the stratosphere, where we'll never have to feel or hear that rotor again, where it belongs. So I'm not a Valjoux movement fan. Tuna says, not bad looking, though. I agree. Overall, I think they've done pretty well with the aesthetics. Frank says, the entry-level JLC Polaris has an exhibition case back with a small movement. Well, the Polaris is very much due for a big refresh, in my opinion. And I know they turned out a couple new Polaris watches this year with some new dials, and the dials were attractive. Again, especially with dive watches, just hide it. Just hide it. Rolex has hidden their movement for years. It's fine. Just hide it. You know what? Or you go to the effort of Blancpain, and then you can display it. Or Omega. You know, Omega, I'm sure fully machine finished movement. Seamaster movements, they're attractive. I mean, they're not going to win awards, but they're attractive. They're nice to look at. You know, they got that nice like spiraling that they do. It's nice. It's fine. It doesn't take a lot to make it look nice. But I'm talking about the decoration. The small thing, I really just think if you're going to be too small, just hide it. But that's my opinion. Again, you do that thick casing and all that, and just have the little window. Some people aren't going to know or care. It's all, again, that's not what we look at most of the time. That the Junghans watch has a display case back with a tiny movement in and of itself wouldn't, like, the display factor of it wouldn't stop me from buying a watch, because that's what faces my wrist. So get over it. You don't have to look at it. But I will call it out because they made the decision to put a display case back on, which adds to the thickness. This is an 11 millimeter dress watch. That's fine for an automatic, but I really feel that it should you should try and get it thinner. And going non-display will let you shave a little bit off. Not much. They're not going to get down to 10 millimeter with that change, but they could get down more than they are. So just one of those things. Let's see. Preju notes, it's a shame because nobody does the Bauhaus design like them. And actually, I can't think of another brand that the closest I could say is Nomos Glashütte. They're really the only other brand that I know of that plays a lot with Bauhaus, true Bauhaus, not quasi Bauhaus like Calatrava's, Patrimonies, Jules Audemars, whatever, that style watch. You could say it's somewhat Bauhaus inspired, but it's not Bauhaus. It's not true Bauhaus. I know, because I actually like those, whereas I can't. I like Bauhaus, but I don't like it in watch. But I've never loved that movement. But there's a rule, there are rules to it about how minimalist it is. And some people absolutely adore that movement, the Bauhaus movement, not the watch movement that we just looked at. So Koji notes that's his gripe with the Polaris as well, is that small movement. Frank says, I've heard the bezel rotates too easily as well. And Pretu says, I bet the plexiglass sits fully in the case, probably the better option, and you save a bit of coin. Yeah, I think some people just rarely worry about plexi because it scratches, but it's real easy to buff out. Just get some of the poly watch, or you can often use toothpaste. I get it, but in a lower cost watch, I don't know. I don't wear that watch much because it's very vintage and it's very finicky, because it's a pin lever escapement movement, which those are not designed to still be alive in this day and age. So it's got its issues. Speaking of issues, let's go to Seiko. It's a terrible transition. I actually think this watch, this is pretty interesting. I like this more, but I own an Explorer too, so it's not too surprising that I kind of like some of the aesthetics here. Let's talk a little bit about the Seiko 5 Sports Field Watch. Now, the Seiko 5 Sports Field Watch is not a new line. However, this is the first time that they've actually put the GMT complication into it. So, if you are someone that has looked at the Rolex Explorer 2 with its stainless steel, non-rotating bezel with GMT functionality, but it's too expensive for you, or there's something about it you don't like. And then you looked at the Tudor Black Bay Pro, but it's too expensive for you, or something aesthetically about it you don't like. Maybe you'd like to look at this, the Seiko 5 Sports Field Watch, which, if you can get past the pricing on it and or the aesthetic choices, because it is not a clone, it is very much a Seiko-looking version of this style of watch, this might be up your alley. Now, price-wise, as it might be suggested with Seiko 5 in the name, this is extremely approachable outside of the luxury space. This is a watch priced in euros with the bracelet. There are two versions. The SSK023, that's the stainless steel one on the bracelet that looks the most like the Explorer 2. That's 460 euro. If you want to go ahead and get like the black PVD version, that's the SSK025. That's on a NATO strap. That's probably why there's the 30 euro price difference. It's 430 euro. But quickly here, monochrome, again, link in the video description. You want to read the article. This is a 39.4 millimeter diameter watch. It's under 14 millimeters thick. It's about 48 millimeter lug to lug. It's got screw down crown, I believe. Yeah, it's 100 meters of water resistance. It does have the Hardlex crystal, not sapphire, so not too surprising given it's a Seiko 5, but just FYI, because some people do care about that. It's powered by the 4R34 movement that Seiko has developed, so they've got that. And then you've either got the NATO strap, 20 millimeter lug width, so pretty easy to do strap swaps. You can either do this 5-link stainless steel version, or there you have the, let's get a nice picture of the NATO. I'm not a big fan of Seiko's bracelets personally, and this looks just as uncomfortable as the rest. But they also have this this NATO option and blacked out case and all of that. So anyway, my thoughts. Again, I prefer this version. The dials look basically the same. They look very well loomed, which would be pretty typical for Seiko's. This is the collar function GMT, not Traveler. So it's if you care about that, that's a difference versus the examples of the Explorer 2 and the Black Bay Pro that I mentioned. So it's collar style. That's just the nature of that movement that Seiko has developed. So with that in mind, however, very approachable price point for a GMT complication mechanical watch with an in-house movement, color matched date window, which is a nice touch, I think. Unique hand shape for the GMT hand, not like Tudors, not like Black Bay, or excuse me, not like Explorer, Rolex, very much its own thing. The whole handset is very much its own thing. You have also got the military time on the interior portion of the dial, and you got your fixed stainless steel bezel, which of course is why there will be comparisons to the Black Bay Pro and the Explorer 2. I actually think aesthetically, this looks pretty nice, far more hardy, far more field watchy, functional tool watch spec than the vibe I get out of the Black Bay Pro and the GMT Master 2, which, not GMT Master 2, excuse me, another GMT watch for Rolex, or the Explorer 2, which, yeah, are kind of in there. I mean, the Explorer line, you could argue, is a field watch line, but honestly, only the Explorer 1, it's not, it's just the regular Explorer, really has a field watch aesthetic to it. And the Black Bay Pro is its own thing. So this does still, I feel, have a lot of that field watch DNA in it. So if you're a field watch fan, this dial aesthetic may very much appeal to you. I don't have any field watches anymore, but this format of the field watch is one of my more favored ones with the interior military time sort of structure. I think this is a really good looking watch. If you can get past that it's got Hardlex, and you can get past that it's a collar GMT, if you're not obsessed with a flyer GMT, I would entertain this as a watch. 20 millimeter lug width, you got plenty of third-party strap options. You can mix this up. You can get a third-party bracelet if you despise what the Seiko bracelet just looks uncomfortable to me. But at under 500 euro, very, very approachable. So I think this is a nice release. Now you see, here's one of those instances where this is where I expect this out of the Seiko 5. Undecorated, ugly movement. You see the distance, it's whatever. It's fine. People, especially since a lot of new watch buyers getting their first mechanical watches, will explore this price point. they like to see how a watch works. So I'm weird. It's like a bell curve for me. Like at the start, when it's low cost, I think it makes sense to do display case back because a lot of people, that's what's going to excite them about watches. Then when you start getting up into that entry level luxury, I start to expect like no more display case back because you're not decorating the movements, and people spending that amount of money shouldn't need to have to look at it anymore. And then when you get to the super high price point, we drop back into needing display case backs because we want to see the hand finishing. I bell curve it. I don't know. That's what I do. So anyway, so I'm okay with it here, given the price point. I think it makes sense. It gets people excited about watches, which I like. So that's kind of where I'm at on these. Let's see. We already talked about that from pre-2. Let me take a drink here. Tuna says, I have several Seikos in the drawer. The 5 line seems like a good deal at first, but they soon lose their luster. Okay. Well, that's a good thing to know. If people have other, and I'm sure there are plenty of them, especially if you consider both collar and flyer GMT functions, where people would like recommendations on GMT watches that you think are good, where like you don't want to get up into Black Bay Pro price points. Here's the thing, and the reason why I do this comparison. The stainless steel bezel, this is not common for most, like a lot of people when they're talking GMT watches, we're talking rotating bezel, GMT Master 2 inspired GMT watches. So if you're really wanting the stainless steel fixed bezel look, you don't got a lot of choices that I know about, but there are a lot of watches. And again, if Seiko can do it at this price point, micro brands could probably play in the sub $1,000 space and give you some options. So anyway, it's just one of those things. I think if you're after GMT in general, I know there are a lot of other options you can go and explore. If you really like the stainless steel look, I would probably start here, unless you already know you want to spend luxury money, and then go ahead and take a look and see what Tudor's doing and what Rolex is doing, because their formats are different. But I mean, anyway, yeah, I've never owned a Seiko 5. Tuna. I have one Seiko. I only have one Seiko. I was very late to the Seiko game. I did not start with Seiko. I never had one growing up to my knowledge. I think I had Timex and stuff. And Citizen was one of my first nice, more adult watches. So Seiko, I got earlier this year, like in March or so, when I got my Prospects. That's my one Seiko, which like I love the bezel play on it. And so that's a dive watch though. And this is a fixed bezel. So, and it has no complications beyond day date. So anyway, just one of those things. Frank says, I agree. That exhibition case backs can help get new people into the hobby. Yeah, that's why I kind of bell curve it, because I do understand. Like when I first got, like I had a Hamilton, and I was like, it was sort of unfortunate because it came on a NATO, so you couldn't really see the movement. But it was my first actually watch with a display case back. I have very few watches with display case backs. Most of my models do not. I think the only ones that I own that are display case back, as I'm thinking, I don't think that Seiko Prospects is. No, I don't think it's a display case back. I think my only ones that I own. Oh gosh, this is hard to think about because I don't normally look at it. My Oris Pro Pilot is a display case back. The Longa one is a display case back. The Seamaster 300M is a display case back, and my Zenith Chronomaster is a display. I think that's it. I think those 4 are my only, and I have 14 watches, so I don't favor display case back. Like it's not usually a buying factor for me. Let's see. Slave me. I'm gonna say. I hope I'm saying the last part right. But anyway, so Slave, welcome to the live stream, by the way, asks, is Seiko a great watch? I only have one Laco and 2 Longines. I want to get a budget or inconspicuous watch for some social parties or going with colleagues, and I don't want to show off my Longines. And Tuna responds, Slave, these days the cheaper Seikos are a bit hit and miss. Yeah, and again, I don't have enough hands-on experience to be a good advisor. So with that caveat out of the way, the nice thing about Seikos is they have a lot of variety aesthetically, and the movements are pretty robust, especially when we talk Seiko 5, the 4R line. The 4R line of movements, while not particularly accurate, generally are within specification and are very hardy. where I've heard a lot more complaints about the 6R line of movements, which also starts moving you up in the price point range. Some other things, like if you're wanting social parties, like if you're doing, like if you're like me, right, like right now, where you're like in a t-shirt or whatever, like you're not dressing up sort of stuff. So you're thinking kind of sporty looking watches. Some other stuff you might want to consider. Seiko owned, but you could look Orient, which they had a big miss. This was in my 5 worst watch video I did last week, but they had a big miss on a dial misprint on their new Mako line. But in-house movements there as well. A lot of really classic looking design choices. Got the kind of dressy stuff like that. I'm not someone who likes to recommend the Orient Bambino because I feel like everyone recommends that as a dress watch. But you can explore like the Komatsus. They're very, very popular. You don't hear the same like bezel misalignment complaints. That's the biggest complaint you hear about Seiko is their dive watches often have bezel misalignments. Like that's the first thing I checked when I got my prospects is it aligned when I put the triangle at the 12? Yes. Is it aligned in every position? Probably not, quite frankly, but we only care when we're at default back to 0. So that would be a thing. We kind of talked Junghans earlier. They have some approachable watches, but that's more Bauhaus design. So you have to like that minimalist format, but that would be a brand you could explore. Citizen, of course. I feel like Citizen often gets shortchanged, probably because they play a lot more in quartz than they do mechanical, especially outside of Japan. But if you don't care if it's quartz, you could definitely look at Citizen. What are some other, like if you're thinking Swiss, which again, based off of that, you own a couple Longines, clearly you're familiar with Swiss watchmaking. You could turn to Swatch Group and look at Hamilton, like get a field watch, something like that. You probably find something around the $500 price point. If you're wanting cheaper, Hamilton's not a good option anymore, but you might want to look at Tissot, especially if you look at used Tissot, could be some options. So anyway, there's some possibilities there, and then there are micro brands. There are a few micro brands that are around that could play in that space, and no one will know what that brand is because it's small. So, and some of the viewers might have some thoughts on micro brands or lesser known brands. I mean, there are all sorts of brands that aren't even micro brand; they're owned by other companies. Like you don't hear a lot about Certina, Mido, I don't know how to say it. One of those, something with an M there. As an option. There's a Baltic. Baltic might be a good one to look at, especially if you're looking for something dressier and low cost. So if something happens to it, no big deal. So anyway, let's see. Oh, Tuna recommended Tissot. So yeah, Tissot. The Bambino tax. Yes. Everyone. I just feel like the Bambino. I don't know about the new ones. I think the new ones look a little weird, but it'll probably grow on me. But everyone, Teddy Baldessar's pushing that Bambino so hard. It's not just him. A lot of people like, I need a dress watch, but I don't dress up too much. You don't want anyone to spend a lot of money, and people just kind of default to Bambino because it's classically attractive, but it's also classically over-recommended. GMC22 says, hello, and welcome to the live stream, incidentally, GCM. Sorry, I think I said GMC. I think it turned you into a truck. I apologize for that. Speaking of Hamilton, is Hamilton good enough? I looked at one and the rotor seemed like it's stuck or doesn't move freely. Don't know if that's a normal feature or not. The rotor should be spinning freely. So that is not a normal feature. It's not a bug, it's a feature. No, it's a bug. I've heard a lot of people have had issues with Hamiltons. One of the channel viewers, a 99 Cent Club member, in fact, who has been on a few of my live streams that we've done in the evenings that play the games, David, he had to send his Hamilton back because it had mechanical issues. I had a mechanical Hamilton chronograph. I already made fun of it earlier because it's based off of the Valjoux 7700 series of movements, which I hate as a movement, but I had to have it serviced twice. I got it back and it broke the same day I got it back. So I don't recommend Hamilton chronographs to anyone because of my experience. The field watches I hadn't heard as much about, but again, that's what David, he had. Again, these are all anecdotal. So it's kind of like, I mean, I had to send my Longa in for service right after I got it, and it had purportedly been checked. I bought it used because, I mean, come on, it's the price point. We can't be spending all that money. But it had an issue. So watches break. So when I hear an anecdotal example, I don't want to lean too hard into it and say, don't get it because I heard that a watch had a movement problem, because they all can have movement problems. It's happened. When you own enough of them, you end up getting lemons on occasion. Most of the companies make it right. The only company I have heard about, again, anecdotal, no experience, I've not owned this brand, where people said, I had a problem with how the watch worked and it was a hassle to deal with, has been Yema. And it has been multiple complaints that Yema does not, I don't know that they don't fix them. It's more like the customer service is a nightmare to deal with. That's the only one I've heard of where people have been like, I just really struggled dealing with the customer service. So I bear all that in mind. But yes, when you take a watch, it might spin freely one direction and not move as well in the other. That's often just because the movement may be a unidirectional rotating rotor. Unidirectional rotor doesn't mean it only spins in one direction. It means it only winds the watch in one direction. That direction has more resistance, so it won't spin as freely. Those Valjoux movements are unidirectional. So they'll spin like the prop of a helicopter when they're not winding, because there's no resistance, because they're not twisting the mainspring. In the other direction, it should spin, but it won't spin like for 5 seconds or 10 seconds like the unidirectionals. And unidirectional is common even in really expensive watches. So it's not necessarily a quality sign if a watch is unidirectional or bidirectional in its winding. That's the reason why a lot of those watch winders will rotate what direction they spin, because you don't know which direction will actually wind the watch. If it only spun clockwise, there are watches that would never wind that way. It's one of those. I didn't know that originally. When I thought rotors just spun and watches wound. I didn't know that they were not all bidirectional. It's my first mechanical watch was a Rolex Explorer 2 that, again, bought used. So back when those were cheap. And so I didn't know any better. It all just depends how we get into the hobby, I suppose. So Slave says, I think I'll get a Casio at this point. I hate smartwatches. I'd rather go watchless than get a smartwatch. I'm not a smart. I look at my phone enough as is. Casio's great. I have a G-Shock. I have a square G-Shock. I'm a big fan of it. It's my robust watch that I like to do for lots of like working on the car, bike riding, outside, just outdoor stuff, mowing, all that. And you can get, there are some that you can get metal ones, and they're not super expensive. They're a few hundred, but they're not like luxury pricing. So there's a lot of fun that can be had with that. And then Casio has all the stuff outside of the G-Shock line. Casio's got a lot of stuff. It's a good brand. Underhate says G-Shocks are great. I have a metal Casio, casual but smart. The GM 2100C, casual but smart enough for most occasions. GCM asks, Hamilton, Certina, or Tissot? I have had this Christmas gift for my 62-year-old dad. I want to think I'm getting him one of the three. It's so tough. It's so tough without knowing what his aesthetic preferences are. Of those three, without knowing anything, I would do Tissot. I think it's the safest option, but your mileage may vary. Tuna notes that he had a plastic Casio and had no QC issues with it. GCM says, thanks for the Hamilton answer. I'll find either Tissot or Certina. So Tissot or Certina. I stand by Tissot, but I've never owned Certina and I have owned Tissot. So again, it's what I know. So that's where my bias comes in. Commander Shepard, welcome to the live stream. I hope that I am your favorite store on the Citadel, or if not, at least your favorite watch channel. I have a Hamilton dive watch, the khaki navy scuba, for a year. Movement works great. I'm getting cost accuracy, only had to send it due to the loom pip fell off, but happy with it mechanically. Yeah, and that's, I think, a relatively easy fix for watchmakers, the loom pip, because it's just glued in. So, or sealed in with its standard binding. So again, all these sort of things can happen, and it's good to have some positive feedback on a really good experience with the Hamilton dive watch. Field watch wise, I had a Marathon that I had very good experience with that watch movement, and it was driven by a Sellita, but it was hand wind only, and it very much had the field watch aesthetic that Hamilton does. I went that way because, kind of like how everyone recommends the Bambino, I felt like everyone was always recommending the Hamilton field watch, and I loved the aesthetic of the dial. So I found another company that did basically the same style aesthetic. It didn't look identical, but was a different brand. And that was kind of cool because Marathon does tritium, which at this point, there are a few watch brands that do tritium, but not many. The two that I know there are more than just these two, but the two that I know of are Marathon and Ball, which if you're willing to spend or look gray, because they go gray pretty easily. So there's some good discounts. Ball Watch might be a good company to explore, especially if you like colorful loom with tritium. Anyway, they have some interesting watches. I've never owned Ball, but I know people who do and speak pretty highly of it. Let's see. Oh, we've got active chat now. Andre says, Hamilton, Certina, and Tissot all use automatic movements that are hard to service and can't be regulated by an amateur. Yeah. But most people, especially like giving it as a gift, I will say most people are definitely not comfortable trying to self-regulate their watch. Also, I think like the Tissot Powermatic 80, I think that's laser regulated. So it should not have sloppy timekeeping out of the box if you're buying it new. It might get trickier when it comes time to service. But let's be frank. When it comes time to service, you would probably send it to Tissot, and they will most likely just put in a whole new movement. That's kind of what they do at that price point. That's probably what Seiko, the Seiko 5, like the 4R movements, they can be serviced by a watchmaker, and parts are plentiful. By and large, they probably just drop in a new movement and call it a day because the movements are pretty cheap. A friend of mine who's been on this channel, Tony, he had a dive watch that was driven by a Miyota movement, and it quit working. I took it apart. I could not figure out what part was broken. I think the mainspring had snapped. I think the actual mainspring had broken because I did not find any non-function, like the whole train of wheels function, but it would not wind. It would just not wind. The rotor was spinning and it felt, the click was clicking. Hand winding didn't help it. Long story short, I was able to find that movement for under $50. So I just did a movement swap and put the dial on the new movement, and he still wears it, and he hasn't said that it's broken again. So that worked again. If I could do it, I do. In the pandemic, I got into taking apart watches. So I have a lot of watchmaker tools, which most people wouldn't have. But anyway, just one of those things. So anyway, hope that helped GCM, and I hope that helped Slave our discussions there. So we have one last thing. Speaking of dive watches, I want to go ahead and jump into this, the Bohen StarDiver. Now, this was a watch review on a blog to watch. We won't read the review, but links in the description if you want to go ahead and read it. I picked this because I wanted to laugh about it. And some of you guys might find this cool, which is totally fine. We all have our own thoughts on aesthetics of watches. This watch is so ugly. I had to call this out. I was just like, holy cow, this thing is just it's so fun. Again, I've made fun of Audemars Piguet. I feel like ad nauseum because they're so expensive. This is not a super expensive watch, but this is not an affordable watch. This is not a cheap watch. This goes into luxury watch pricing. So I want to talk about this watch, but we're going to go ahead. They actually do have the specs because it's a review. They actually included them. So I want to talk a little bit about some of this information. So this is a almost 2,200 euro watch without tax for those of you in the EU, or over 2,700 on bracelet. Now, the watch is 41 millimeter diameter, at least as of the bezel. This is a chunky watch, but it's a wearable chunk. I don't know what that means, but we're going to say that. It's a wearable chunk. It's a chonker. Okay. It's almost 15 millimeters thick. That's actually less than some Longines, which Longines, come on, guys. You have some beautiful dials, but you can't be going in like doing these GMT moon face things and then making them 17 millimeter. It's weird. It's weird when this chonker watch is thinner than that. 48 millimeter lug to lug. So most wrists will, at least for men, most wrists will be able to wear this most likely. I have a 6.75 inch wrist. I basically can wear anything under, in my opinion. It depends on how your wrist is shaped and what you're comfortable with. But basically, I kind of draw the line at 52 millimeter. But 51 and under, I can do. So 48, wearable. This is a red flag. 24 millimeter strap width. So you are not going to have a lot of third-party options for this. 24 millimeters is extremely odd. Extremely. But there is so much about this watch that makes no sense to me. Or we have to resurrect Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. They were so busy asking themselves if they could, they didn't stop to ask if they should. And that's why I wanted to talk about this watch. So let me find one of the wrist shots so you can see what this thing looks like. I mean, it looks rugged. Full credit. And I hear they're very nice people that behind this brand, Bohen. But There's so much about. All right, so here's one of the wrist. Can I not zoom in on these photos? Okay, well, apparently not. Okay, you're stuck with this size of photo. Maybe I can zoom in the page. There we go. There we go. I've adapted. All right. So why I think this watch is ridiculous. All right, they've gone ahead and they put the knobs, the crowns. Let's be a little professional. I know I'm running a little long, but let's be a little professional. All right, they put the crowns left-hand style. That's fine. A lot of people are going to think that's cool. Left-handed GMT, Rolex, people love it. Okay, so we got the old. This style has grown on me a bit. This sort of tri-date thing where you have a pointer and it like shows you multiple days, but it identifies which day you're actually on. That's been growing on me a little bit. These hands are ugly, really ugly. I mean, like really ugly. I don't know what shape these are. I'm going to call them chunker hands because they all look really like, I like the second hand and that's about it. They're like, they took like the sword hands and broadsworded them. I'm not sure. I think it's clearly this way in order to accommodate what you can tell from the shot, because you can see it green from the shot, the excessively high quantities of lume that they've dumped on this watch. So this watch is definitely, again, it's leaning into the tool watch aesthetic. But there's some other choices here that don't make sense to me. Okay. You notice that it's hard to see in this shot. It says Swiss, but like in Swiss or in French or something like it says Swiss, right? Instead of Swiss. I'm pointing that out because that's going to become relevant later. Just be aware that they say that and they put it off here at the 430. Okay, fine, whatever. No one really cares. 1,000 meters water resistance, awesome depth rating. No one cares. I don't know why it says set for that. Like, you're supposed to read the manual, right? So why are we printing instructions on the watch? To me, that is a weird decision. It's ugly. It's a weird decision. The crowns don't seem to be the same size. It's ugly. It's a weird decision. I don't like it. What else don't I like? Well, I don't know. How about let's do Arabic numerals, but only 2 of them, only the 6 and the 9, and let's not even make them the same size. Let's make the 6 be the 6 and make the 9 be the 9. It's ugly. I don't like it. I don't know why you did that. Why are we using different sizes? They did it on the bezel too. The 10 is smaller than, maybe the 10 and the 20 are the same, but the 30 is bigger than the 20 and the 10. And I don't know if these are getting bigger or if it's just like small, big, big, big. I don't know. It's ugly. I don't like it. I don't know why they did it. I think it's weird. So that's what I wanted to talk about on that. Going back over to the case back in and of itself, bracelet looks, again, is fitting the chonker aesthetic. All right. Seahorses, hippocampus, whatever. All right. So we're stealing from Omega. Okay. It's the back, so let's not be too harsh. But here it's saying Swiss made. Wait, anti-magnetic is, I guess, in French, but Swiss made's in English. Valve helium's in English. Why are we using 2 different languages? It doesn't make any sense. And let me remind you that it says Swiss, I think in French, not in English, on the dial. So non-English on the dial, English on the case back. I don't like it. It doesn't make sense. I don't get it. This is a weird watch. This watch is going to appeal to a certain person, but not me. This watch, it's just, and while this is super well loomed, I remain bothered that the 6 and the 9 aren't. They're so big, especially the 9. Look at this 9. This 9 is like 1/5 of the dial up to the, if we factor out the chapter ring. This is so ugly. This is so ugly. Yeah, I understand why someone threw it in the creek because it was really ugly. It looks very wearable. So full credit. And this, holy cow, I don't know what's going on with this bracelet. This looks both super uncomfortable and super secure. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't like it. So that's my theme about the Bohen StarDiver. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't like it. But your mileage may vary. What an interesting watch, though. So it is nice to see that there are companies that are willing to take whatever chance this is. And I almost feel bad making fun of it, but they had to know what they were doing with this. So, but again, at over 2,000 euros, almost 3,000 if you want it on that weird chunky chonker, uncomfortable secure bracelet. This is serious. This is serious levels of money. I mean, you can get like Omega 300M gray market for around what these sell for new. So I don't know if I can get behind it, but I wanted to talk about it. So, all right, catching up on the chat. I know there was a lot of discussion about the movements and the bidirectional stuff, so I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and be somewhat merciful. Matthew, who is a 99-cent club member, I do appreciate it, and welcome to the live stream. David ripped this watch a new one on the Blog to Watch weekly podcast. I heard him start making fun of the Swiss thing with the dial and the case back being in different languages, and I thought, I didn't look at this watch, so I have to fully credit, and that's why we have the link to the article on it in the show notes, because I heard that same podcast, and I thought, I can't picture this watch. It sounds like an abomination. I have to load it. It actually looks better than I thought from their verbal description, but it looks terribly ugly. Terribly ugly. And so it's just like someone decided, what would a Swiss Army knife look like as a watch? And they did it. And we're living with that world. And I like that we're in a world where we get to see it. But because at least this feels like it has functional value, not like that Alex AP watch, which is a fashion watch that they didn't even make sense in the advertising and is so expensive as to be a true abomination. Whereas this is expensive and aesthetically is an abomination. But I think it can actually do everything it says. So as a tool, I can still appreciate it. So Koji says, that's a watch only a mother could love, or the designer. They're going to sell some. They got to, right? I mean, there are people that like that style. I don't know if they're watching. They might not. Feel free to comment if you do like it. I mean, you don't have to agree with me, and I'm not going to go after you if you actually like it. But I had to talk about it. It was just too interesting to me. Andre says that isn't going to slip under a cup. That's true, but I do want to stress at 14.8 millimeters, there are Longines watches that are thicker that we've talked about this year that are more elegant, and that is shocking. But again, as someone who's not owned a Longines but loves so many of their design choices, they need to get the thickness thing solved. And almost like this is a Swatch Group thing at this point, because Swatch doesn't make a single. I don't make a single watch. They make a single watch, I believe, mechanical, advertised for unisex or for men, that's under 10 millimeters thick at this point. And it's like, you guys have dress watches in your catalog. And yeah, a lot of them will slip under cuffs. So, they keep some under 11 millimeters or 12, but I don't know. It's just one. I don't know if I should blame Swatch Group or not. I feel like blaming something. Commander Shepard says, I agree. I like the looks of the recent Longines Spirit flyback titanium chronograph. It is way too thick to wear regularly, though, so no buy for me. That is a case in point one where the watch looks so good, but it's so thick. And maybe it's not going to feel top heavy because it's titanium, and that's fine. It's still too thick. Like I have gone through I have thick watches. Like I have the 300M. It's thick. I have a Moser Center Seconds Pioneer, which I wear so much on the weekend and I got it knowing it was thick. It's meant to be a big watch, but I can't wear it to work because it doesn't slip under the cuffs of my shirts. And I'm not going to strap it to the outside because I'll look like a dork. So we have to have certain rules. So, or as Tuna would say, no, just no. GCM asked, how much is that dive watch? Well, again, they have it in euro. So, the euro and dollars are relatively 1-for-1. So, and this isn't including VAT. So this should be a decent approximation, but it's basically a $2,000 to $3,000 watch. Kind of. It's closer to 2,000 if you get it on the rubber, and it's closer to 3,000 if you get it on the bracelet. So yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it's serious money. That's why in part, I don't feel too bad making fun of it, because if this was a $500 watch as a tool watch, we've got space to play with. at this price where like you're well in Tudor operating price points, especially gray market, unworn gray market. It's like you've got like, how do you resell this once you're done with it? I guess you don't. That's a factor that like, if you don't know if you're going to like it forever, resale, just being able, I don't even mean like getting all your money back. Obviously, you know, watches are meant to lose money. I mean, getting anyone to buy it. There's a big question. Commander Shepard feels it's a mismatch of various dive watch designs that don't go together, so you get this monstrosity. They took some aspects from the Breitling Super Ocean styling. Some of the handset stuff kind of reminds me of that as well. Tuna feels your friends will laugh at you. That's true, and not in the way maybe you want it. Slave endorses Longines as a brand. Yeah, so much. They probably have some of my favorite dials. I just wish they were thinner watches. Scotty Pinball, welcome to live stream. We're almost done. I know. I don't know. I normally go an hour, by the way, but we've had such robust discussion. The language change is basically business on the front and party on the back. That's a good comparison. GCM notes at about $2,000, they get a Longines instead. I would as well. Resell, that's a white elephant gift. Yes. Just don't tell them how much you paid for it. So, because when they look at it, they will think it's a normal white elephant pricing. Okay, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. It was a nice, robust group on the live chat. I do appreciate it. I will plan to be back next Saturday. That's what, Christmas Eve. Yeah, that won't be a problem. No problem. I should be back. We'll see if there are any new watch releases. Otherwise, I'll try and pick an interesting watch topic to do. But I'll be back at the usual 10 a.m. Central start time, like I try and consistently do. That's it for now. Have a really good weekend. I hope you all enjoyed the stream for whatever it was, for whatever chaos we did. And I'll talk to you all on the next week. I don't know if I'll have any pre-recorded videos in the meantime. We are in the holiday season and I'm wrapping up stuff for work. So don't expect anything other than the next live stream. But until then, take care and enjoy your weekend.